Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a recent spate of propaganda, blatant, brazen propaganda in Australia that asserts brown and black immigrants are being horribly discriminated against by white people and only white people, those evil fucking fascist white supremacist fucking Nazis. Hitler was just seen going out the back door a moment ago. So this is how bad and evil these people are. And they're engaging in the most horrible, venal discrimination against black and brown people when it comes to getting hired and job applications and which people get interviews and so on. And the propaganda cuts straight to it. A lady who's married a local guy and who's got the surname Smith, but she wanted to test the amount of evil fascism that's in Australia, and the country that just let her in and approved her coming in, even though she's not even literate in her own language. I mean, they're obviously Nazis. Goodness me. So she goes from being having the name Smith, which is her new husband's name, going back to the surname Umboko or whatever it was from the third world country that she came from. And when she uses her maiden name, as it's called, Umboko, she finds that she gets fewer job applications than she does if she uses the name Smith. Now, somehow we're supposed to believe that this woman who can use the name Smith and successfully get job interviews and job offers decides to not take any of those jobs, but instead to send out resume CVs using her surname Umboko to just compare the difference so she can prove that there's evil discrimination going on. So, okay, I mean, is that a good way to spend your time? Are you an activist or just some ordinary citizen? As portrayed, that she's just an ordinary citizen, and that's meant to be an indication of how all these people are suffering, from the third world immigrants are suffering if they used their original name. So now, we hire a lot of people, and I've hired and had to interview or be involved in interviews, panel interviews, and so on. And once political correctness and the equal opportunity, or not equal opportunity, the affirmative action started, then you're getting these radical sort of lesbian types and gender studies types getting into the human resource departments, and they're everywhere now. But back in the time, they would sort of try and load the interview applicants, job applicants. They try and load it up with some black and brown people. And it got to the point where, they had to be 50% male, 50% female applicants, 50% white, 50% non-white. And I remember asking an HR sort of manager who was junior to me in the company, saying, well, look, if the amount of black and brown people in the at the time is sort of 10%. Why would you want 50% of the applicants to be black and brown? If only 10% of the population is. Because her first pitch was, we have this community we serve, and you have to that's. And then she sort of pivoted around and said, well, no, that doesn't matter. We have to have equality of outcome, and as these people are discriminated against, we have to give more of them more of an opportunity to counter this fascist Nazi discrimination that's everywhere. And she was one of the early sort of people who was trained to believe that Nazis are everywhere, but only in white countries. Now, today when I look at any Indian company and I see 99% Indian people working there, or a Chinese company, where again, you're lucky if you even see one white person at these organizations, and it's just a token white person, or it's a receptionist or something like that. Why aren't they also racist? No. It's only white people can be racist. Only white people are damn fucking fascist fucking Nazis. There's Hitler. Hitler's just over there. So only white people can be this race. If an Indian company hires only Indians, then they're just being assertive. If the Chinese company only hires Chinese people, again, that's fine. But if white people want to hire white people, They're fucking damn racist, fucking fascist Nazis. Okay, all right, well, let's run with that sort of thread of the propaganda. Now, we recently had, some huge upticks in the mass migration to Australia, 400,000 people brought in just 1 year, and that's in a population of 26 million, for Christ's sakes. So that'll give you an idea of the scale of that migration. Per capita, it's one of the highest rates of migration in the world. So they're coming in now. The affirmative action. There's two levels of affirmative action, by the way, particularly with the government and the big companies. The affirmative action is, on one hand, to gift jobs to these immigrants, particularly Indians and so on, to gift jobs to them without merit. So it's a completely affirmative action thing. Now, if you look at the sort of people that are getting jobs here, they've got no work experience, they've never worked. If they have worked at all, it's been in some family company, because they come from a well-to-do family company where they've got a monopoly in a certain district or area. So all they do is sort of pretend to be important and shuffle a bit of paper, and that's it. They've got no expertise or anything, and they've got their degrees are from a university where it's a standard practice to bribe the university to get the degree or the credential. So these people have no qualifications at all. No, you wouldn't employ them at all. There's far more local people who are qualified who could fill those roles. So they're gifting these affirmative action jobs to these people, which only adds to these people's sense of entitlement. They're entitled to come to Australia. They're entitled to a job. They're entitled to prestige. They're entitled to this, that, and the next thing. They're entitled to whinge and complain about racism and so on. They're entitled to their own political, politicians. They're entitled to special dispensations for their racial diaspora. So all this affirmative action stuff just feeds and increases their level and sense of entitlement, and it's hard to, when you're sitting next to some or talking to some super entitled Indian or so on, it's difficult to sit there and listen to the nonsense that they come out with. Nonetheless, so that's one side, the gifting of the affirmative, but the other side is where the public service and the big companies that rely on government contracts, the amount of employees they have, these artificial jobs that are created. In Soviet communist style, these jobs just created to provide employment, affirmative action employment for these people. Not only are they being gifted jobs that they couldn't win on merit, but there's a huge expansion in the number of jobs, just so these people can be stuffed in there to fill the jobs that aren't needed or wanted, and add all sorts of cost. So effectively, the taxpayer is paying for all these unwanted, unneeded, unqualified people to come here. But this idea that there's widespread discrimination, it's a defensive sort of pre-attack type concept of propaganda. As these masses of brown and black people are brought in, unwanted, unneeded, no one's agreed to it, are brought in under globalist sort of planning. Then where are they going to find employment? And they just the propaganda is to remind people, if you don't employ brown and black people, then you're a fucking fascist Nazi, and to try and shame, blame, and coerce, through use of propaganda, and these absurd claims that people are being, Ababuba Umboko has sent her resume to 100 companies and has not yet got an interview. Or has attended 10 interviews and has not received a single job offer. Well, what can be the cause? It's got to be fucking racism by Nazis. That could be the only cause. There could be no other cause. That she walks around in African garb and in full dreads and can barely speak a word of English, has no skills or qualifications, has never worked at a job, has nothing. How is someone like that going to get a job? You have to gift them a job. That's the only way they're going to get employed. Otherwise, there are better qualified people here. But the idea of competition by merit for jobs or anything for that matter, competition by merit is in itself fascist, Nazi, fucking white supremacy. It's evil. Merit is evil. Now, it's not evil when these people want to go to a surgeon and get him, life-saving surgery. Then it's not a problem. Then they want the best. But other than that, everything is social engineering, and as they see it. So I've noticed this spate of propaganda articles coming around claiming that, and they're usually, women are usually the ones that these women are being oppressed and refused interviews or refused jobs and so on. I don't believe any of it. I think it's all propaganda concoction. And then there were some stats. They made the mistake in one article of quoting stats. Now, the amount of non-white people in Australia now has grown to, depending on how you crunch the numbers, permanent students, so 40 to 45% of the population is now non-white. And so in one of these propaganda pieces, they were talking about when it comes to interviews selection that only 42% of the applicants were non-white, and this again proves evil fascism is everywhere. Hitler is everywhere. Nazis are everywhere. But if you look at the population split, then it's exactly along population lines. So if anything, given the low quality of the immigrants, they're very low quality, no expertise, no qualifications, can't speak English. So they should be a much smaller proportion of the total interviews, but instead they're almost exactly in line with the population mix. So the idea that this somehow reflects racism is absurd. But the article goes on, this particular one goes on to argue that unless it's 50-50, then it must be because of Nazis. What else could it be? So very, very ideological, very silly, but full of lies. I mean, you could tear every one of these propaganda pieces. You could tear apart. But I noticed some of them are getting reposted and quoted on business websites, where I'm assuming activists of all the globalist activist lurkers were ever ready to push some propaganda that's pro-globalist. But it was an interesting look anyway. It's a load of nonsense, of course, but it shows how all the facets of the globalist machine, first the immigration, then the propaganda, and then that it's all interlocking and interacting, and all quite well coordinated, and of course very well funded. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.